What's good, YouTube? We're talking college sports in the Deep South, where college football is king, and on the plains of Auburn, the battle cry is War Eagle. Once again, it's Kennard Vernon Stewart here on the podcast with some breaking news as Auburn has cashed in on yet another recruit for the 2020 recruiting class. This is a huge get for the Auburn Tigers as Auburn wants to start the trend of roster development. All right, so here's the situation. Auburn, although in the middle of probably one of the most, pivotal points of the Auburn Tigers tenure as, of recent, this is a huge year for Auburn going into 2019 as Gus Malzahn wants to solidify himself as a coach and also move Auburn to a different direction. The 2020 recruiting class is already reflecting that. Have several offensive linemen. That's what Auburn needed is, several offensive linemen. And, you just got to get it done there because you don't want a situation where you're rebuilding. You want to start reloading. Now, if you look at the Auburn Tigers going into 2019, you have a situation where Daniel Thomas, Jeremiah Denson, and Javaris Davis will be gone after this year. So you're talking about a huge chunk of the secondary that will not be there anymore. And also, let's just say by chance, Noah Igbenogany, who made the transition from wide receiver to defensive back, if he has a breakout year, man, look, once again, it's Kennard Vernon Stewart here for the podcast where the battle cry is War Eagle. And on this channel is always great to be an Auburn Tiger. Auburn has cashed in, like I said before, on another recruit for the 2020 class. And that is Marco Domio out of Houston, Texas, currently with Blinn College. If you all remember Blinn College, that's where Auburn cashed in on Cam Newton. Cam Newton, of course, one of the better quarterbacks in Auburn history, Heisman Trophy winner, and helped Auburn to a 2010 national championship, the first national championship for Auburn since 1957. This is such a huge get for the Auburn Tigers because you want to start to build a roster to where you start to replenish the talent at the cornerback position, at the secondary position, because, all these guys could potentially be leaving. We think Noah Igbenogany has all SEC talent and could have a breakout year to where it makes sense for him to declare for the NFL draft along with Javaris Davis, Jeremiah Denson, and Daniel Thomas. So guess what that leaves? That leaves somewhat depleted talent. So you want to go to the JUCO market to get a guy who has some college football experience and bring him to the table and add to that solidification at the cornerback position. Well, when you look at this thing, what does he bring to the table? Well, in the brief film study that I saw of this young man, Marco Domine, Domio, he has some great range. One thing I like about it, when you play in a cornerback position, you got to play with a lot of moxie. He plays with a lot of confidence. He plays with a lot of anticipation. And he's very good in coverage, whether it's in the intermediate passing game or the deep passing game. So that's something that could translate immediately to the point where you could be talking about a guy that could be a starter on the 2020 season for the Auburn Tigers. And that's something that you definitely need. You got to gain some ground. Okay, you made some mistakes in the past recruiting wise, but all intents and purposes says that Auburn is really trying to correct these wrongs. And, hats off to the Auburn recruiting efforts, especially when you look at, where Auburn was prior to Big Cat Weekend. Then you have the recent picnic at Auburn to where this kid actually silently committed, say, hey, I want to come here. I want to be an Auburn Tiger. I want to play. And then finally made his verbal commitment And the good thing about this from a value standpoint is the fact that he had LSU and Texas A&M on the list as places where he wanted to go, and they were actively recruiting him. As a matter of fact, Alabama was actively recruiting him because he's, a very talented cornerback. So this is a big day. This is a huge deal for the Auburn Tigers in the midst of everything that's going on. You got fall camp going on in a very consequential season for Gus Malzahn and his staff. I think things are starting to become a little bit more solid for the Auburn Tigers. But when we look at this 2019 season and everything that's ahead, Auburn's got to win some games. The Oregon game looms large. You talk about a win over Oregon. You talk about the possibility of going into the Texas A&M game undefeated. Texas A&M actually has lost a lot of guys, has to replace a lot of guys. So Auburn going in there with the experience that they have, you solidify a win there, you continue the winning trend all the way into the LSU game, and you let the chips fall as they may. I think this is a huge gain for the Tigers. I think this is a huge gain perception-wise as to where the Auburn Tigers program could potentially be headed. Big shout out, you know what I'm saying, to the Auburn Tigers in continuing the recruiting efforts and looking to the future. Now, I think this needs to be a good season for the Auburn Tigers. But when you look at what's ahead in 2020, you don't have that. I'm not saying that North Carolina won't be a good team in 2020. Auburn has to face them in the Kickoff Classic in Atlanta, Georgia. But you have an opportunity where you have a favorable schedule and you start to get things back on track recruiting-wise. There's a very good chance when you look at Alabama that Tua Tagovailoa will be declared for the NFL draft this year because I think he's going to have a pretty good year. Also, Jake Fromm from Georgia will declare. So you're looking at a situation where Auburn can really capitalize off of these things in 2020. Don't get me wrong. I really want Auburn to have a great season, and they have the roster to have a good season in 2019. But you got to also look at the future ahead. Is this the time where even if Gus Malzahn doesn't meet all of the expectations, people are saying, look, hey, Gus got to win 9, Gus got to win 10, Gus got to win whatever. You got to look at the progression recruiting-wise that Gus Malzahn and his staff is making. Also, you look at the coaching staff as it is. You got Rodney Garner as the defensive line coach. You got Kevin Steele as the defensive coordinator who is not allowed. No offense has, from a statistical standpoint, scored more than 20 points per game during his tenure. Are you really ready to break that up? Okay, Auburn's got to win. I believe with this roster, Auburn should win at least 9 to 10 games and start to get this thing going for the future. Has this happened before? No. A lot of you guys will say, well, Gus this, Gus that, Gus, whatever. But this has not happened before where you have the type of recruiting efforts that you have right now. I think Gus and his staff. I don't want to say Gus by himself, but Gus and his staff are starting to get it. You got to recruit to build the roster, to build the team, not just to patch things up from year in to year out. You got to put some solid stuff together to where you can start to reload instead of rebuild. And when you start to land guys like this and some of the other offensive linemen that they've landed for this 2020 recruiting class, hey, you got to look at what's happening for the future and long term. Yes, Gus is always on the hot seat. Coaches in the SEC are always on the hot seat. I'll go out on the limb and say, for hot seat purposes, Kirby Smart is on the hot seat and don't even know it. But either way, big win for Auburn today in picking up a huge recruit. And, just goes to show the effort is there. All of the things that you need to be successful in Power 5 football and the SEC is happening right now at Auburn, whether you care to acknowledge it or not. It is what it is. Once again, it's Kennard Vernon Stewart here for the podcast tonight. Huge win for the Tigers, picking up on Marco Domio. Once again, guys, it's always great to be an Auburn Tiger. War Eagle.